They said the ASAP mob was built on loyalty. They said the Brotherhood ran deep in fame, deeper than money, deep in the streets they came from. But secrets rot even the closest families from the inside. And in this story, the first secret was whispered long before the gun ever went off. According to those close to Crew, there are things the public never saw. Egos bruised behind closed doors, old betrayals packaged as business decisions, friendships stretched thin by fame. And at the center of it all were two names the world already knew, ASAP Rocky and ASAP Relly, once friends, once brothers in the same circle, until the night everything changed. The most forbidden secret was this. Long before shots were reported in Hollywood, the friendship had already died. Nobody wanted to say it out loud, not with the world watching, so the silence became the perfect breeding ground for suspicion. For months before the incident, small fractures formed between Rocky and Relly, cracks that only widened as careers, money, and pride divided them. Some insiders later told reporters that the tension wasn't new. It had been brewing in shadows, whispered during late-night studio sessions, and kept from the public eye. And then came the night of November 6, 2021, the moment that would explode into headlines, lawsuits, and a criminal case big enough to capture Hollywood's full attention. The official records describe it simply, a confrontation on a Hollywood street. Two men who once trusted each other facing off under neon lights, and an accusation that would shake the entertainment industry. According to ASAP Relly, the moment spiraled fast. He claimed Rocky approached him during an argument, pulled out a semi-automatic handgun, and fired 2 rounds. One fired bullet. He said, grazed his hand. He said Rocky then walked away, leaving him injured and stunned in the street. LAPD detectives later testified that the call came in just after midnight. No one saw what led up to it. No camera caught the full incident. No eyewitness stepped forward with a clear view. In the beginning, all anyone had were allegations and a fractured brotherhood. But Relly insisted he knew what he saw and who pulled the trigger. Rocky insisted he didn't do it. And the world, as always, chose sides before the truth even had a chance to breathe. As investigators dug into the case, a strange sort of tension began to form. Every answer created 3 new questions. The police moved quickly. In April 2022, Rocky returned from Barbados with Rihanna, only to be met by officers and arrested at LAX. It was a public scene, flashing lights, cameras everywhere, the kind of moment no celebrity can outrun. Hours later, LAPD executed a raid on Rocky's home, searching for the gun allegedly used. But the reports were clear. No gun matching the bullets found at the scene was recovered. No forensic link. No DNA. No conclusive surveillance. Still, the charges landed hard .2 felony count of assault with a semi-automatic firearm, crimes that could carry up to 24 years in prison. The court filings shook every corner of the industry. The media fed on the uncertainty like vultures circling a fresh hit story. Social media divided violently, half defending Rocky, half demanding accountability. But behind the headlines, the truth was still buried somewhere in the middle. In private, insiders whispered that the 2 men had been drifting apart for years. Some said it was business. Some said pride. Some said betrayal. Everyone had a version, but no one had the whole picture. The civil lawsuit added another layer of tension. Relly accused Rocky of assault, battery, emotional distress, claims that painted the confrontation in a darker shade that Rocky's lawyers fought back, calling the allegations exaggerated, inconsistent, unsupported. By the time February 2025 arrived and the criminal trial finally began, the nation had already turned this into a morality play. Loyalty versus betrayal, fame versus truth, brotherhood versus self-preservation. The courtroom atmosphere was electric. Rocky sat at the defense table, quiet, focused, while Relly entered with visible weight on his shoulders. 2 former allies now forced to relive their worst night in front of strangers. Prosecutors laid out their case with calculated precision. They pointed to Relly's testimony. They played clips showing the 2 men meeting moments before the alleged shots. They spoke of chaos, of anger, of a moment where a feud turned into violence. But the defense countered with cold, sharp logic. No gun, they reminded the jury. No forensics. No surveillance capturing the shooting. No physical evidence tying Rocky to the bullets. And then came the twist, the one nobody saw coming. A witness who had once claimed to support Relly's account suddenly hesitated under cross-examination. Statements made months earlier didn't line up perfectly with statements made in court. Memories blurred, details shifted, small inconsistencies began to ripple across the testimony like cracks in glass. Rocky's attorneys pressed harder. Was this a misunderstanding, a setup, a long-standing feud turned into a legal war, or something else entirely? Something even messier. By the third day of trial, the tension was unbearable. Two men who once shared a dream were now sharing a courtroom, each forced to confront the same impossible truth. Either someone was lying, or someone was terribly mistaken. The jury deliberated for only a few hours. Minutes passed like dripping water. When they finally returned, the entire room seemed to hold its breath. The foreperson stood, voice steady. Not guilty. For a moment, everything froze. Rocky exhaled. Relly stared ahead, expression unreadable. The mob, what was left of it, stood divided. Outside, the cameras swarmed like hungry insects. Rocky walked out a free man. Relly left with a civil suit still pending and questions that no verdict could answer. Because here's the haunting part. Even after the trial ended, even after the evidence was poured over and dissected, what happened on that Hollywood street in November 2021 is still known only to two people. No camera recorded the moment. No third witness stepped forward. No recovered weapon tied the case into a neat conclusion. Just two men, one accusation, one denial, and a truth swallowed by shadows. The court gave its answer, but it didn't give closure. Some still believe Rocky. Some still believe Relly. Some say the truth lies somewhere in between. And as the dust settles, one final question hangs in the air like smoke. When loyalty dies, who gets to tell the real story? Rocky sat in the back seat of the SUV as it rolled down La Cienega, streetlights slicing across his face in thin gold lines. From the outside, he looked untouched, calm, still, breathing like a man who'd been through this before. But inside, every mile between him and the police station felt like a countdown. Not to an arrest, not to a headline, to a betrayal. He replayed the moment from earlier that night. The familiar silhouette stepping out of the shadows in the Hollywood alley. The voice he'd known for years. The accusations thrown like knives. The sudden escalation. The sound that changed everything. If the police believed he pulled the trigger, this would be the scandal of the decade. If the public believed it, it could be the end of everything. But Rocky knew something the world didn't. Something he had kept quiet for years. Something about Relly. And some secrets were worse than anything the public could imagine. At the station, detectives didn't start with evidence. They started with psychology that a calm rapper is dangerous. They said, a composed man is rehearsed. They circled him with questions like vultures around a wounded animal. Did you approach Terrell Efron that night? Did you brandish a weapon? Did you threaten him? Over money, loyalty, anything? And at any point, did you fire a gun? Rocky answered every question the same way, steady, clear, and without a single crack in his voice. No. Detective Moreno watched him closely. She studied micro-expressions, the things people did without knowing. Most suspects twitched, looked away, lied too quickly or too slowly. Rocky didn't do any of those. Instead, he did something else, something stranger. He looked tired, not guilty, not scared, not angry, just tired. Like he'd been running from something long before this case began. Across the city, Relly sat on the edge of a hospital bed, hand wrapped in gauze where the bullet had grazed him. He kept rehearsing the story the detectives asked him to repeat. Rocky lured him there. Rocky pulled a gun. Rocky fired. But the deeper truth, the one Relly never spoke aloud, pressed against his ribs like a bruise. He didn't hate Rocky. Not really. He hated what Rocky became without him. Years ago, before the fame crystallized, before the world started calling ASAP a fashion icon and cultural force, they had been inseparable brothers in ambition, if not in blood. Relly had introduced him to people. Relly had vouched for him in rooms that mattered. Relly had taken heat for him when things got messy. But loyalty could twist into resentment so quietly that no one noticed until it was too late. When Rocky rose, Relly didn't. When Rocky got opportunities, Relly didn't. And when Rocky stepped back from the ASAP collective, focusing on fatherhood, fashion houses, creative projects, leaving old relationships behind like fading shadows. Relly didn't step with him. He stayed where he'd always been, watching, waiting, growing sour. The prosecutors called it shooting. The blogs called it betrayal. But the real story, it was a slow-motion collapse of something that once felt like a brotherhood. And tonight was only the explosion, after years of silent erosion. Detective Moreno wasn't satisfied with either man's version. Too clean, too controlled, too rehearsed. So she turned to the only witness that mattered now. Hollywood itself. Security cameras dot side street dash cams. Doorbell footage from a condo 3 blocks away. Clips from 2 bars, a gas station, and a parking garage exit. Alone, they showed nothing. Together, they formed a timeline. Rocky wasn't lying. He'd been on that block. Relly wasn't lying. Shots were fired. But the footage didn't resolve the most important question. Did Rocky pull the trigger? And that was the problem. Because the closer Moreno looked, the more the footage seemed almost too convenient. Too aligned with Relly's account. Too precise in what it revealed and what it didn't. Then one detail changed everything. A figure, barely visible, moving behind a parked SUV at the exact moment the gunshot was heard. A figure who wasn't Rocky, not a figure who wasn't Relly. A third person. Someone who left before police arrived. Someone no one mentioned. Someone who shouldn't have been there. Moreno froze the frame. Zoomed in. Enhanced shadows. Not to identify them. Faces were impossible to see. But to identify a clue. A chain around the person's neck that a pattern that matched one thing. A chain only one person wore. A chain worn by a former ASAP affiliate. One who had disappeared from the collective years earlier after a falling out. One who still held a grudge that no one talked about publicly. The prosecution didn't know about this footage. Relly didn't know it existed. Rocky didn't even know someone else had been there that night. But Moreno did, and she was about to pull on a thread that could unravel the entire case. Everything, loyalty, betrayal, ambition, brotherhood, was on the table now. But what scared her most wasn't the new suspect. It was the question she couldn't stop asking. If this third person was a shooter, why did both Rocky and Relly stay silent about them? What exactly were they trying to protect? She replayed the footage one more time. 3 men, 1 gunshot, 3 stories, none matching, 1 truth, still missing. Hollywood didn't just hide secrets. It buried them under fame, loyalty, and fear. And this case was no longer about who fired the gun. It was about why everyone was lying. As Moreno prepared the file for the next phase of the investigation, she whispered the question that would haunt the rest of the case. If the wrong man is on trial, then who's still out there? And what exactly were they protecting that night? Detective Moreno didn't sleep that night. She couldn't. The frame of that third figure kept replaying in her head, grainy, blurred, almost ghost-like. A chain glinting beneath the streetlight, a shoulder turning, a foot pivoting, a silhouette walking away seconds after gunshot. It wasn't proof, it wasn't evidence. But it was something no one had mentioned. And in Hollywood true crime, the most dangerous people were the ones who weren't supposed to be there. Moreno pinned the image to her board. The city map beneath it lit up with red markers tracing the timeline. Relly's path, Rocky's path, the witnesses, the cameras. One line was missing, the third figure's path. And that was a thread that could unravel everything. In another part of Los Angeles, Relly was unraveling too. He sat alone in his apartment, blinds shut, painkillers scattered on the table next to the untouched plate of food. His hand throbbed where the bullet grazed him, but the deeper pain was the one he tried not to think about. He was alone, truly alone. No crew, no loyalty, no one checking in. The people he once called brothers kept their distance now, not out of fear, but out of exhaustion. The years of internal tension, financial disputes, unspoken resentment, it all simmered beneath the surface. Relly felt like the last one holding on to a legacy the world had already moved on from. But tonight, as he sat in the dark, he kept seeing a face in his memory. Someone who shouldn't have been at that alley. A familiar presence. A familiar voice. A familiar anger. Someone who had more reason than anyone to see Rocky fall. But Relly couldn't say that name. Not yet. not without burning bridges he'd never rebuild. So instead, he stuck to the story the detectives expected. Rocky pulled the gun. It was safer that way. Safer than telling the truth. At Rocky's home, a silence hung heavy. His lawyers forbade him from talking to anyone except family. Phones off. Social media dark. His world collapsed into careful words and legal caution. But that wasn't what troubled him. Rihanna watched him from a couch, arms crossed gently, eyes filled with worry only someone who loved him could understand. "You look like you're carrying something you're not saying," she said quietly. Rocky inhaled, exhaled, stayed silent. She moved closer. "You can tell me." He shook his head. "Not yet." Because the truth wasn't just dangerous. It was radioactive. If he revealed who else was in that alley, everything would explode. Not just legally, not just publicly, but personally, the kind of explosion that destroys old loyalties forever. He had spent years avoiding that fallout. Years protecting someone he shouldn't have. Years refusing to expose something darker than the shooting itself. And now that secret was hunting him all over again. Detective Moreno returned to the alley at 2:13 a.m. Sometimes crime scenes speak more clearly at night, when the city quiets, when the echoes from the past feel closer. She stood exactly where the camera had caught the third figure, behind the SUV. Near the dumpster, the spot where a person could hide almost completely. She crouched down, scanning the ground with her flashlight. Nothing obvious. No shell casings, no dropped jewelry, no footprints that meant anything. But then she noticed something strange. A faint scrape on the concrete, not from a shoe, from metal, as if someone had quickly knelt down or picked something up. She snapped a photo, bagged a sample, logged the location. It wasn't much, but in cases like this, not much sometimes cracked open everything. Her phone buzzed. A restricted number. She answered. Detective Moreno. A distorted voice came through, low and urgent. "You're looking in the wrong direction." She froze. "Who is this?" "You think this is about Rocky and Relly," the caller said. "It isn't." Moreno stepped back, pulse rising. "Then who is it about?" A pause. Then, "It's about the person neither of them will mention." The line cut. Moreno stared into the darkness of the alley. A chill washed over her. Because the most dangerous kind of suspect is one that both the victim and the accused are protecting. The next morning, the footage leaked. Not the full video, just a still frame. The grainy silhouette, the figure behind the SUV, the chain, no face and no identity. But the internet didn't need those. Blogs erupted. Comment sections ignited. Fan pages split into war zones. Who was the third man? This case just got darker. Why didn't Roxy or Relly mention him? Was this a setup? What are they hiding? The narrative shifted instantly. Rocky wasn't the only suspect anymore. Relly wasn't the only victim. The story was no longer simple. It was layered, twisted, uncomfortable. The kind of story Hollywood loves, until it becomes real. That afternoon, Moreno received a message. No number, a single sentence. Check the alley again. Daylight hides things night reveals. She drove back immediately. This time she scanned higher, walls, windows, rooftops, balconies. And then she saw it. A small mark on the sidewall. Barely visible to a scuff from a shoe climbing up, fresh, right above where the third figure had stood. Someone else had watched the encounter from above. Someone who had climbed the wall and escaped before officers arrived. Someone agile, determined, and possibly trained. Moreno stepped back as the weight of the realization crushed her breath. There weren't 3 people in the alley that night. There were 4, and only 2 had come forward. A knock hit Relly's apartment door that evening. He opened it. The person standing there wasn't a cop, wasn't a friend, wasn't Rocky. It was the one person he feared more than any of them. The person he thought had disappeared years ago. The person whose chain matched the silhouette. The person both he and Rocky had been protecting out of fear, loyalty, or something darker. The person he never expected to show up at his door again. The figure stepped inside, without waiting for an invitation. Relly's stomach dropped. "You shouldn't be here," he whispered. The figure smirked. You shouldn't have talked. Detective Moreno didn't know it yet, but she was no longer chasing a shooting. She was chasing a secret inside a brotherhood built on art, loyalty, rivalry, resentment, and silence. A secret deeper than any public feud, a secret both men were terrified to reveal, that a secret now walking freely through Los Angeles. And in the quiet of her office, staring at the case file, she whispered the question that would define the case. If there were 4 people in that alley, who is the one pulling all the strings? And what exactly do Rocky and Relly fear will come out if they tell the truth? Detective Moreno stared at the scuff on the wall, the one that proved someone had climbed out of the alley that night. Her mind raced. 4 people, for stories, but only 2 had spoken, and both were lying by omission. She replayed the anonymous call in her head. It's about the person neither of them will mention. Who could both Rocky and Relly fear enough to protect, even at the cost of their own freedom? She returned to her desk, opened the files, and stared at the timeline. Something was missing, not from the crime, from the history. The collective wasn't just a group. It was a system built on loyalty and controlled by the people who understood the darker side of loyalty. Silence. Her phone vibrated. Another restricted call. She answered slowly. This is Moreno. A breath. A whisper. You're too close. Then silence. Meanwhile, Relly wasn't alone anymore. The figure in his apartment paced the room like a predator, examining the weakest animal in the herd. Relly's heart hammered so hard he could feel it in his injured hand. I kept quiet, Relly said. I didn't say your name. I didn't. You said enough? The figure cut in. A small laugh, cold, humorless, filled the room. You told them he aimed at you. That's all they needed. Relly swallowed. You were there. You saw what happened. You could clear this. You could. The figure stepped closer. I didn't come here to clear anything. Relly felt the temperature drop. He wasn't scared of Rocky. He wasn't scared of the police. He was scared of this person, the ghost in the collective's past, the one who had left after a violent falling out, the one who had always felt overshadowed, the one who believed the world owed him something, the one who hated what Rocky became, and the one who hated Relly even more. Then why are you here? Relly whispered. The figure leaned in. To make sure you understand who controls the story. At Rocky's house, he felt it. The presence in the city, the old energy, the old threat. He knew who was back. He had always feared this day, the day the past circled back and demanded payment. Rihanna saw the tension in his jaw. You're not telling me something. Rocky exhaled shakily. He'd been strong through everything. Allegations, headlines, arrests. But this was different. This wasn't legal trouble. This wasn't public scrutiny. This was personal. You remember I told you, he said quietly. There were things I protected even when I shouldn't have? She nodded. He stared at the floor. He's back. Her eyes sharpened. Who? He said nothing, but the silence was an answer. Detective Moreno connected the final dots. She pulled up the footage again and froze on the chain around the mystery figure's neck. A design discontinued years ago, that a design worn only by a handful of people, a design linked to a specific era of the collective, the era before the fame, before the fractures, before people walked away bitter and silent. She pulled old records, names, faces, history. One file stood out. A former member, the quiet exit at a pattern of explosive temper incidents, that a past full of fights, fallouts, and unresolved grudges. Someone who had reason to resent both Rocky and Relly. Someone volatile enough to appear in that alley. Someone the rest feared enough to protect. Moreno whispered the name to herself. Every hair on her arms rose. If she was right, then this entire case was built on a lie of omission, and the real danger wasn't in custody. He was out there, walking free. Then everything happened at once. Moreno rushed toward her car to put out an APB. Her phone buzzed again to a text and no number, just a video. She tapped it. The camera shook slightly, as if held in someone's hand. A dim apartment room, at a table, a familiar person sitting with their head down. Relly. Their voice trembled. He's here, he said, his breathing uneven. I can't. I don't know what he wants, but A shadow crossed the screen. The same chain glinted. The figure leaned down beside Relly, but the face never showed. All Moreno saw was the hint of a smile. Then the video ended. 1 second later, another text. "Stay out of this." At that exact moment, Rocky's phone buzzed. A single message out a location pin. No words. His stomach dropped. He recognized the location. It was the alley. The same alley. The place where everything began. Rihanna touched his arm. "Don't go." He didn't answer, because he knew exactly who sent it, and exactly what it meant. The past wasn't resurfacing. It was calling him back. Detective Moreno raced the location too. Lights off, heart pounding. She felt something electric in the air, the kind of tension that comes before either a breakthrough or a disaster. The alley was darker than before, quieter, colder. A single silhouette stood at the far end, but it wasn't Rocky and it wasn't Relly. It was a figure from the footage. Moreno froze. They were waiting. For her, for Rocky, for the truth. She stepped forward. "Don't move," she shouted. The figure took one slow step back into the shadows, just beyond the reach of the streetlight, just enough to stay invisible. Then a voice, low and chilling. "You're chasing the wrong man." Moreno's breath stuck in her throat. Then, who should I be chasing? A pause. Then, ask yourself why both of them lied. Moreno swallowed. "Why did you come back?" The figure turned slightly. The chain glinted. Because unfinished stories always return. The alley fell silent, so silent Moreno could hear her own heartbeat. A second voice echoed behind her, a familiar one. "Rocky, what did you do?" he demanded. Moreno spun around, but the figure was gone, vanished, as if they were never there at all. Just the chain's faint metallic jingle fading into the night. She turned to Rocky. "Who was that?" she asked. Rocky exhaled like a man carrying 10 years of buried truth. He finally spoke. "The one person who can destroy all of us." Moreno stepped closer. "What are they trying to hide?" Rocky stared at the spot where the figure disappeared. His voice cracked. Something worse than the shooting. The case wasn't solved. The truth was revealed, and the real threat wasn't caught. The investigation had just begun. As Moreno sealed the alley, she knew the question haunting every dark corner of Los Angeles tonight. If the real culprit keeps controlling the story, what happens when her version is the only one left? And what exactly happened in that alley that both Rocky and Relly would rather go down and reveal?